All right. Welcome back to the Be a Man podcast, where we encourage men to be better men. Joel, I'm glad to have you on. Why don't you introduce yourself to everyone?
Hey, thanks so much for having me on, Justin. My name is Joel. I help men in their marriages and men specifically because I think it's apropos that this is the PMN
Mhm.
podcast. Yeah, really, you know, if we look at marriages, it really does start with the man taking his leadership role that God gave him and him stepping into that now. That doesn't mean that you dominate your wife anyway. It just means that you lead and to be a better leader for our marriages. That's what it's all about. So a lot of the content, if you follow me on Twitter or see it, is based around that. I've been married for this is year 18. Been with my wife for over 20 years. And most of the problems that happened in my marriage were not so much on her end. It was me failing to step up in certain instances of leadership. Have 5 kids. So that's another kind of like what we say, weight that has to be carried. But I love it. I love them, and I love being married. So yeah, that's me, brother.
Yeah, so so we're having video issues, which, whatever, technology. But let me ask you a question. When you say you weren't there was some leadership and things like that going on, and that you were the problem issue, what do you mean by that?
Like, so guys will complain that their wives don't want to have sex with them, right? It's like she doesn't have enough sex with me. It's like, okay, well, let's see what she's dealing with. She's taking care of the house, she's taking care of kids all day. So by the time it's time for sex, it's like, well, she's had kids all over her all day. She's been cleaning up people's messes all day, and it never stops. Being a mom never stops. It's 24/7. Is getting up with the babies crying. It's well, how about you look at what she has to deal with and not just what you need? So for me, it was like, well, how can I take these things off of her plate?
Mm,
She's not happy in a dirty house because when you have young children, it's just it's a constant mess and you're constantly cleaning it up. And so how do I keep the house clean with having these young children?
yeah.
Well, on my end, it was like, well, how about you make some more money and hire a cleaner to come help clean?
Mm,
So then now that now she feels, relaxed. It's like there's this running task list that she has all the time. And you're gonna just add to that now, like, okay, now it's time to have sex. Come on, man.
yeah.
So, that's an example. I think that a lot of men with young families, young children deal with. It's like she doesn't want to have sex with me. Well, it's like, well, no, because if you were to go off and get a hotel and the kids aren't around, then it's on, right? Well, yeah. So what's the difference? Well, she doesn't have that, you know, the association of having to clean up, make dinner, take care of the kids. It's like, no, it's like you took her to dinner and she got to sleep in a nice made bed and it's quiet.
Yeah. I see what you're saying there. Like, I think there's some aspects like paying more attention that, especially as guys, we need to do better at, and
Mm-hmm.
noticing these things, but also asking good questions. And I think, what are some of these, like you talked about sex, but what are some of these areas that you see that are super common in people that you work with?
So it's it's pretty common that I'll have a guy who's like say let's just say task oriented or thinks a lot. And it's very common that their wife is like feelings dominated. So the issue that'll happen is that you have a guy who's, you know, action oriented or thinking oriented, trying to explain things to a wife who's feelings oriented. And it's like she wants to feel like you care about her, but all you're prioritizing is like the budget.
Mm,
Like if all you're prioritizing is the budget, you're making her feel like she's not cared for. And that was one of the main things why she married you. She felt like you cared about her. But now you're worried about work, or work as a priority, or the money as a priority, and she's gone down the line.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I'll work on with a lot of my clients is, dude, like, your wife has been crying out for you to kind of show her that you care about her. And as
Mm.
soon as you show her that you care about her, then she'll follow along. Like, I don't know if it's like Stephen McCovey or somebody. It's like, people don't care what you know until they know that you care.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, that actually plays out a lot in marriages. It's like, yes, you're right about the budget. Yes, you're right that she spends too much, or yes, you're right that whatever is not right. But it doesn't matter to her because she doesn't feel like you care about her.
Mm.
And in the honeymoon phase, or on the front end when you were dating, like, that's all you gave her was care, 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 care. But now you have the responsibility of a mortgage, you have the responsibility of a family, and so those things do matter. But now it's like, you need to be able to balance those things, and that's a challenge for a lot of men, and that's what we work with. So that's not every scenario, but that's one that I run across very frequently. It's the man becomes almost unemotional because they have things to take care of, and then they forget to give that to their wives, and their wives are just crying out for it.
Yeah. Yeah, I know I can relate. We have 4 kids. We've been married. I think we said 16 years, almost 17. So,
Nice, nice.
we've been, there's been ups, there's been downs, a lot of those things. And I think it's easy because what you're describing, they're all good things in and of themselves,
Mm-hmm,
working, providing, all those
mm-hmm.
different things that need to be done. But sometimes we forget how do I want to put this? We forget the real life things that happen, right? Like, it's just we just, I don't know if we just take them for granted or what it is exactly, but we just forget.
It's a very real thing, and I've had this thought along the lines of what you were saying. It's, you get so wrapped up in the work, in the building of whatever it is that you're trying to build, that you start to almost disregard or not appreciate what you were building it for in the first place, which was your
Mm,
wife and your kids, right?
yeah,
It's like
yeah.
it's like why are you doing all this thing and spending all this time? Well, I'm doing it for my wife and my kids. Well, they just want some. They just want some. They just want you to show them that you care a little bit. But yeah, I'm doing it for my wife and your kids. It's like, well, are you? And so that was a big struggle for me. Was, uh, I'm building this thing. Oh, I'm building it for my wife and my kids. It's like, well, they just want you to put your phone down and play with them. Or, she just wants you to, when she's in the kitchen, you know, go up behind her and give her a kiss on the neck and tell her that you love her and she's the greatest woman in the history of mankind, right?
Mm,
Like,
hmm.
like that's who she married. And now you can't be bothered because you want to watch sports ball.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's a good point, and I think some of it is just that we just grow kind of complacent with
Mm-hmm.
the everyday things, and
Mm-hmm.
I man, it's ringing home because there's a lot of those ways that you just, I think you just kind of grow apathetic to it all.
Mm-hmm.
And because you're busy, you get tired, you get in the routines, you get so much into it that you just forget the day-to-day things. So I wonder, like, what are, let's say, 2 or 3 things guys could focus on every day to make sure that, like, put them at the forefront of your minds every single day, that you need to do these things to make sure, especially your wife knows that they are cherished, that they are loved, that they are important to you.
I love that you said that, because that's like such human nature. So my wife is my dream girl. She is legit my dream girl. Like, I dreamed of her. Okay. There's this guy on Twitter, a friend of mine. His name is Brad. He's age survivor. So he was in prison, and he would talk about how, when he got out of prison, all he wanted to do was to brush his little girl's hair,
Mm,
right? So when he gets out of prison, What does he do? He brushes her hair, tears rolling down his eyes. He's like, I brushed their hair for hours.
Mm.
2 weeks later, Daddy, will you brush my hair? No, 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 I ain't got no time for that. And I was like, that is like perfect. Like that when he said that, I was like, that is the most human nature thing. That is so human nature. I've been longing for this thing. I want it so bad. And as soon as you, not as soon as you get it, but over time, this becomes the new normal. And then so it's okay, no big deal. I'd rather watch the game than brush my little girl's hair. Or, hey, like, yeah, you were my dream girl, but now, like, I'm used to, we've been doing this for 20 years, so no big deal.
Mm.
So that is human nature, and so understanding that that's kind of who we are. If we look at the Bible, that's just like the whole Bible, right? It's like everybody's like, oh, God save us, and then it's like God saves them. It's like, oh my God, we love you so much, and then 2 to 3 generations later, they're doing like they're doing even worse.
Mhm.
So, for me, the Bible is the foundation for everything.
Awesome.
When I follow who God made me, my marriage thrives. And so that starts with me being grateful to God and being in God's presence. That's it. Like,
Mm.
if I get that wrong, then everything else is out of order. So for me, it starts with me being grateful to God, me thanking God for his love, for his grace, for his love, for his mercy. That's everything. And then from there, it's like, hey, Joel, these are the things that I want you to do. Okay, great. But I'll tell you, the times when I was, busy trying to build my own kingdom, my marriage suffered.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. What does that look like? Like some guys, they're going to listen to this. Most probably know what you mean by that,
Mhm.
but can you explain that more for guys who maybe are like, what are you talking about? Kingdom.
So like for me, that means like being in worship. So like I start my day like listening to worship music and praising.
Mm.
So I give God the time that he and the respect that he deserves. That's worship, and then reading the Bible. So that's basically like, if you want, I don't want to say a to-do list, but like a practical, probably be better for the word I'm looking for.
Hmm.
Like that's where it starts. Because then God builds me up so I can pour into her. So that's where it starts from.
Sure. Yeah. I know that's good. Like, I think making sure our foundations are established first thing is
Mm-hmm.
super important. And I think that bleeds over into the family as well. I'm sure your kids and people, they see those things and they see that, you know what, they do things just a little bit different. And in our experience, it has raised a lot of questions from other people. Like, why do you guys do things different? Or why do you not talk just practical level? Why do you not talk bad about your wife when she's not around?
Mm-hmm.
Or like, why do you not say these things that everybody else is saying? And it's like, I just, I personally, I don't think that way. But also, like, why am I going to put down the person who I'm going to go home to? Like,
Mm-hmm.
friends come and go, but your spouse, you're committed. You're there for a lifetime.
Yeah, the that's a funny topic, right? Like, if I talk bad about my wife, okay, say I talk bad about my wife, who chose her?
Yeah.
So if I say that she's, whatever, insert negative comment, and I chose her, what does that say about me?
Mhm.
So I tell my wife, you have great taste. Why? Well, she married me, right? And then so the guys that I work with, I had a guy actually, and so one of the exercises that we do is like, let's come up with a list of 20 things that you love about her, or like about her, or positive attributes, right? And he had a hard time. He had a hard time. He had a hard time coming up because he was so focused on the negative.
Mm.
And then so I was like, okay, you're having a hard time. Okay, that's fine. There's been years of resentment built up. So okay, I get it. And I asked him that question, does she have great taste? And he was like, no, no, no. She terrible taste. It's like, she chose you, didn't she? And he was like, oh, positive quality number one. She has great taste.
That's pretty funny. That's good. Yeah, I like that. That's pretty good. Yeah. So, I mean, you've been talking about coaching a lot. Like, how'd you get into this?
Um, so I started Twitter, well, X, whatever. Because I actually wanted to start a podcast, and I was like, well, this is a good place to find people and, invite them on the show and talk about, whatever it is that was I thought was interesting.
Mhm.
And the more that I talked and then the more that I interacted, it's like, I'm not a fitness bro, so I'm not going to tell you how to get jacked in a six pack. And, I haven't been, you know, crazy successful with money. So it's like, that's not a place where I can speak with authority, but it's like, I've made a marriage work and I've actually like gone through quite a bit. And, a lot of my friends we got to the age where it was like people who were married around the same time as us, were getting divorced and stuff like that. So like, I think I know what makes this work.
Mhm.
And also people would kind of just seek out my advice, when they were having marriage problems. And I always kind of pushed it away, because it was like, dude, I don't want to deal with I got my own problem, I don't want to deal with it. But it was like they would still keep coming and asking me. So it was like, oh, all right, God, you're kind of bringing me my people here. And so, yeah, that's really where it kind of stemmed from. It was just, people would come and start asking me stuff, and it was, I don't want to deal with your problems, but they kept on coming and asking me stuff. So it was like, well, maybe I should, you know, take this more seriously. And so I had issues in my own marriage, and I worked through those, and I was like, well, that could have broken, a lot of people. So
Mhm.
let's use that for God's glory. And so my heart is for to build up men, to build up their marriage, because I think as the marriage goes, so does the country. And the man is the foundation of the marriage. So if we're upset about the way the country is going, well, let's look at families and let's look at the men who are leading them.
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, that's something I talk about pretty regular is that, you know, at some point I looked around and I said, where are all the men at? Like, what's going on here? Like, where have we failed? When's it happened? And I mean, eh, different people have different ideas of when it started, but as far as history goes, but I mean, you could go all the way back to Genesis if you wanted to, but
Yes, we
uh,
can. And that's something that we've done in our Bible study. So yeah,
that's where it really started. But
yes, it
uh,
exactly.
but I mean, there was a time in at least in America where there was at least a moral fabric, to an extent where you didn't see a lot of like men were willing to do whatever it took. Like you watch these shows or you read about people who went on the Oregon Trail and all these things. They had no idea what was ahead of them. They had no idea, but they were willing to just do it and be bold and courageous and all those traits that we look for. And now it's like, where are all these people? And and not that there's none, but it's like we've lost something in the process. And now it's I think that we're seeing a resurgence of guys like you, others who I have on here that are starting to say, we're going to push back. And a lot of times it's not that guys don't want to, it's almost like they don't know how because there's a father problem or whatever it may be in our culture right now. And they need to be taught and learn how to step back up and do what God has called them to do.
I love that you brought up Genesis,
Yeah.
because that's actually the template for the men that we were supposed to be. So, like, I don't consider myself like a masculine man. I I don't work on the car. I don't fix things. I'm not handy in that way. Um, I can't beat anybody up, you know what I mean? So like the things that you would kind of like associate with like manliness, like I don't really think that
Sure.
that's, me. Um if we look back at Adam, the first thing that God did was he placed him in Eden. Eden is not a physical place, it's an environment, and that environment was in God's presence. So the first place that a man needs to be is in God's presence. That's why I start my day
Mm,
that way. The
yeah.
second thing that he gave him was work. He gave him
Hmm.
something to work on. And then he told him to cultivate it, which means to improve it. So he was in the garden to work it and to cultivate it, which was to improve it. He was to guard it and keep it, which was to protect it. And then he gave him the word. Those were the 5 things that he gave him.
Mm,
So if we're looking at rebuilding the man, well, the man needs to be back in God's presence first and foremost. And I don't know about the men from the Oregon Trail or founding fathers, but they sounded like men of faith,
hmm.
right? So I mean, were all of them upstanding or whatever? I don't know, but they probably got some of those right. Maybe they weren't in God's presence, but they got work done.
Hmm.
They knew the word. They let's say out of the 5, maybe they had 3 of them. I don't know. I don't want to like just disparage them in any way. But if we look at like a modern man, which of those 5 does he have? Doesn't have the word, not guarding or keeping, cultivating what? I don't know. God's presence? No.
Mm, yeah. I mean, you're exactly right. Like, I think, yeah. I mean, we're missing that God factor. I think all throughout culture now,
Mm-hmm.
and that is really the root of most of our problems, especially in marriage as well. And
Mm-hmm.
it's I think we could trace it all back to that. And I think when people they want the solution, but they don't really want the solution sometimes.
You know how like people can find like what's the problem here? It's climate change. It's like, bro, this has nothing to do with this has nothing to do with it. Like, what's the problem over here? It's climate change. That's how I am with like God, but it's actually like the right answer. It's like, why are these school shootings over here? Because you took out God. All right.
Yeah.
Why is there racism? Because you took out God. All right. Why do men not trust women? Because you took out God. All right.
Hmm. Yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, you're exactly
I
right.
wish I wish people had the if people had faith in God the way they have faith in climate change.
That's a good point. Yeah. Yeah, I've been yeah, that's another topic for another day. Climate change. I'm like, it's summer, right?
Yeah, it's just called the weather.
But I mean, all these things they go back to a failure to not see God in it, to put ourselves ahead of him, which we've seen all throughout the scriptures, all throughout history, where
Mhm,
people, when they elevate themselves, we think of the Tower of Babel. You think of some of these key events, even after God led the Israelites, I mean, out of Egypt, and they get over and I mean, he parts the seas for them to cross over. They see all these things, and what do they do immediately? They start whining and pitching a fit again like a little baby,
mhm,
right? They don't really want what they want, if you get what I mean. Like they want the benefits, but they don't want to put in
mhm,
the work. And I think
mhm,
that's part of what we're missing in many ways, is that we don't really just want to put in the work to know God better, but then also put in the work to, for our families, for our wives, for
mhm.
our work, all those things that we do. We're missing that element to it, and it's part of the problem that we're seeing in our society today.
Well, he's Lord and Savior, right? People
Yes.
love the Savior part, but the Lord means that God owns me.
Mm,
So I want to be saved. Yes, thank you, God. But I'm going to hold on to this and take control of my life over here in this area. I don't need you here in this place. My finances, oh, I got that, God. You're okay. I don't need you in here. My bedroom, I don't need you here. I got this under control.
Yeah.
And if we look at it too, even like if we don't even look at it biblically, what is like the worst place that you could have been in history? Well, if you look at godless China, communist China,
Mm.
godless Nazi Germany, godless communist Russia, right?
Hmm.
These were as secular as you can go. Let's remove God as far as possible. What happened? Atrocities.
Hmm. Definitely.
And so you do that on a smaller scale. You remove God from your marriage. Well, what happens? Well, death, right? So
Hmm.
when Adam bit the apple, they didn't die right away.
No.
There was a spiritual death, and then there was consequences that came from it. But it took a while.
Yeah.
You remove God from your as a man, you remove God from your life. Well, okay, things are going to start to suffer. It could be your finances, whatever. But in my realm, the marriage is going to suffer.
Yeah.
And you've
Yeah.
opened up, and you've opened up doors to turn your head to other things as well. You turned your head from God. Well, now you're going to turn your head from your wife.
Mm. Yeah.
And this is not the time to be playing around, right? Like you're on Twitter, you're like thought bots pop up like crazy. You
Yeah.
think that's good for you? You think that's good for your marriage?
Yeah. Yeah. I hear you. Yeah. And I think, you know, I think about, you made a comment there about manhood and different things. And, I follow along on Twitter and whatever and follow along and things. And you're no stranger to some criticism at times. And I noticed some recently you had on there. I'm like, I mean, people criticizing you for being a marriage coach or whatever. And it's like, how do you respond to stuff like that? I think handling criticism is a huge trait that's missing in a lot of men today.
Um, I mean, no, I don't like to get criticized, right? Because
Yeah.
it's like here I am doing this thing, and it's actually out of pure motives. Like, yeah, I get paid for it, but my goal is still to help men in their marriages, right? So that's a good thing. So, but the thing is like the man in the arena is always going to get criticized,
Mhm.
right? Like I didn't get criticized when I was on the sidelines, but do I want to stay on the sidelines? So that's just the cost of the entry. So you're going to have to deal with criticism. I mean, let's take sports ball for instance, right? Like those coaches, those players, they get reamed by people who have not even a fraction of the ability that the people have in the arena.
Definitely.
So so again, am I going to concern myself with the opinions of people who aren't trying to do anything?
Yeah. Yeah. I like that you threw out a little Teddy Roosevelt there too.
And if we look at it, right,
Yeah.
the beginning of wisdom is fear of who?
Mm. Yeah.
The Lord.
God.
Okay,
Mm.
fear of God, fear of the Lord. If I'm afraid of criticism, who am I afraid of now?
Mm. Yeah.
I'm afraid of man. I'm pretty sure Noah got a lot of criticism. Dude, you're building an ark, you dummy. For what? Rain? I'm sure he got mocked like crazy, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a really good point because I think a lot of guys, they start to try to do things different and then they start getting criticized. And it's like, man, what do I do? Am I doing it right or am I doing it wrong? And it's like, well, why are you doing it? And I think your point there about is who are we fearing? That's a really good point because I mean, ultimately, we're going to stand before God one day,
Mm-hmm.
not some other person
Mm-hmm.
who really has no authority, no say at all.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's really good.
I drop bangers, bro.
That's right. Well, hey, I think you mentioned it before, but where can people find you?
Uh,
What's the best way to get a hold
on
of you?
on the X on Elon's X app at the Joe Lopez. So it's TheJoelLopez. That's pretty much where you'll find me. That's where I all my traffic, and I'm not on any other social media. So that's it, man. That's where you can find me.
Okay. Yeah, and I'll include that in the comments and things description as well. But um I've really appreciated this talk. I've really, I think it's going to encourage guys, because anytime we can talk about marriage and how to become better men in that, I think it's a worthwhile conversation, and we need to have more of them in our society, especially. And guys, I think are in many ways desperate for it. They need this. And if someone wants to reach out, I encourage you to reach out to Joel. I think it's going to be really helpful to you. It sounds like, from what I'm hearing and from what I've read already online and things, is that you have your priorities straight, and you're going to put those priorities front and central in guys' lives to help them, point them to God first, and then work on those other areas as well in that process. But one of the things I like to do as I close is I want to give you a moment here to challenge the guys with something. It could be with this week, it could be something this rest of this year, whatever it is. Give the guys some type of challenge.
Okay. So I think you had mentioned before that things are getting pretty tight, right? Money, food's getting expensive, gas is expensive. Like, dude, I go to Costco and it's nothing nice. So I get it. I'm gonna challenge you as men to tithe. The first thing that you want to do when things get tight is, okay, I'm gonna hold on to this money. Now is more important than ever to tithe. Sow into the kingdom. Trust God. He'll make the 90 go farther than the 100 will go for you. That's the one place where God says to test him, is to test him in your tithe. So I would encourage men to tithe. Put your money with God. I wouldn't trust in, I mean, they talk about Bitcoin, they talk about the dollar's useless, blah, 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 blah. In the kingdom, none of that matters. God is not broke. God does not need your money. He wants you to trust him. So that would be my challenge.
That's really good. I will tell you, that is the first time I've heard that. That's a new one for us here. And it's a good challenge. It's hard sometimes to step out on faith. And when we tithe, that's exactly what we're doing.
Mhm.
And it's not easy in any way, especially when things are getting tighter and tighter. But it shows that step of faith that he's called us to do.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's really good, man. I really appreciate this. I've enjoyed this conversation, and I'm going to encourage guys, go look at Joel. If you're having issues and you want to talk to somebody, there's the man. Talk to him.
Hey, thanks for having me on, man. Thank you.